Forget the records of 2024, folks, because it's not going to matter in the Big 12 standings this season. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. And I have the expert to show me why you should not be sleeping on Oklahoma State in 2025. This is a Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Oklahoma State.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into a Locked On College crossover, Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Oklahoma State. Big 12 teams bringing you the best content, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Christian Rauh here with Cody Stovall. We got lots to talk about today. I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be sleeping on Oklahoma State. Cody obviously is going to give me the firepower, the gunpowder, if you will, to back up me because I'm worried about this game for Kansas State folks later on in the season. I don't like where it's at in the schedule, and I know that Mike Gundy's not going to make sure this team finishes 0-9 in the Big 12 like he did last year. We got plenty to talk about what there. Obviously, fall camp starting for both teams. We're going to talk about what you think about these two programs heading into the new year, and then we might finish off with just our thoughts on the Big 12 as a whole. Before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Cody, welcome on into the show. Obviously, we got a good one for you today. And I'm leading off with some strong, bold takes here, and I'm sure you're in agreement with it. But I don't think you should sleep on Oklahoma State this year. Kansas State plays them the 10th game of the season in Stillwater, and that makes me nervous. It's a very nerve-wracking game for me heading into Stillwater. Obviously, you got Utah right after on the road as well for Kansas State. Why do you think – give me the gunpowder and the firepower for why that is a statement that I should be making, why I should not be sleeping on Oklahoma State in 2025.
Well, Christian, I greatly appreciate you bringing me into the fold here. I do think that it is going to be significantly different. Other than the fact that we do live in the bipolar Big 12, where you really have no idea if 16th is going to be better than first, so on and so forth. I think the parity of the league is going to be beneficial from a marketing standpoint, but it's obviously not going to be beneficial to all of these teams. And you mentioned it. Kansas State has to come to Oklahoma State. We were talking a little bit off air in the last 20, 25 years. 70 some odd percent of these games have come down to one score affair, and it does typically favor the home team. Another big thing I think we have to take into account this year is Mike Gundy is not going to allow this season to happen. If one thing is certain in this offseason, there's an emphasis on controlling the state of Oklahoma. I don't know if you've noticed in recruiting, we've landed 6 of the top 12 recruits in all of the state of Oklahoma. OU has landed virtually none of those. So it's been a big year in recruiting, and the emphasis has been securing the state, keeping the protection of Boone Pickens Stadium, and that's where K-State has to come to. So regardless of what we look like on the road, and I think the complexity of the offense and defense is going to take some time, so it might get dicey on the road. I do think that there's a hammering home moment happening where we take care of Boone Pickens Stadium this season.
Obviously, Mike Gundy, one of the coaches that's the most tenured coach in college football behind Kirk Ferentz of Iowa. I think he's the second most longest coach been there since 2024. You're going into a year this year where you're going to have people tailgating that can legally drink this year and have not seen any other coach other than Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. Absolutely insane. And then you look at the official record, the overall record between these two programs. Oklahoma State runs this one. I mean, 43-28 overall record. But you look at last year, right? I say we shouldn't. I led the show saying we should forget the records last year, but we obviously have to know what went on last year. Finished 0-9 in the Big 12. Did get a win against Arkansas, though. Shout out SEC, right? Good job, SEC. You did get that win. But a lot of people, myself included, I thought Oklahoma State was going to be a great team last year. I was really excited for what Ollie Gordon was going to bring to the fold. There was a lot of excitement for that offense, and it just didn't pan out. What went wrong with Oklahoma State last year that made that happen, that made them finish towards the bottom of the Big 12?
Well, traditionally, whenever you have 20 returning starters and virtually 90% of your roster returning after a 10-win season where you play Texas for the Big 12 title, the assumptions are that you're going to be really, really good. And 99% of the time you probably are, unless there's complacency happening. And I think that's the biggest thing that happened to Oklahoma State this previous season. The coaches that have been there for 19 years, 17 years, 14 years, typically beneficial, unless everybody gets a little too cozy. When you have 36 to 40 upperclassmen, the coaches that have been there for 15 years assumed that the upperclassmen were going to be the ones that were the driving force in the competitive nature of practices and who's doing the extra workouts and who's doing the extra film, but nobody was checking on each other. So essentially laziness got spread from the coaching staff, right? That's where it starts. And it filtered down to the senior leadership that we're not really ready to be leaders, I guess. And we obviously suffered because of it. And then coming into this season, there's a lot of hype about the Big 12 in general. I think that's a good thing. The parity we mentioned earlier, this is such a quarterback-driven league that it's difficult to beat anybody. But even when I've aired grievances about some of the things Mike Gundy has or has not done, I do think it's kind of crazy. You mentioned the tenure. I think it does go Kirk Ferentz, then Kyle Whittingham, then Mike Gundy. Whittingham got hired like literally 20-something days before Mike Gundy at Utah. But here's the fun part, Christian. They don't have a returning quarterback. Neither do we. They lost a bunch of pieces. So did we. Yet everybody's proclaiming that Utah has a chance at winning the Big 12 because of who? Kyle Whittingham. Mike Gundy has more wins than Kyle Whittingham, a higher winning percentage, and a better bowl record than Kyle Whittingham. Yet somehow Mike Gundy is not being afforded the same favoritism. That part I don't get, right? Could we struggle? Yes, we absolutely could. But people saying that Utah is going to be good because of Kyle Whittingham and pretending that Oklahoma State's going to be bad because of Mike Gundy, that is the most Hippocratic statement I could think of in the offseason. It doesn't make sense, man. It is still Mike Gundy. Death, taxes, 8 to 10 wins is traditionally where we live. So last year was a down year. He addressed that problem by firing, almost every single coach, Christian. The head coach that keeps dudes for 17, 19 years fired everybody not named Sean Snyder, ironically enough, right? So I think Mike Gundy answered the call. There was a problem, and we needed to address the issue. I'm going to do something that is very uncharacteristic, and I'm going to fire everybody. I'm going to rebuild everything from the ground up. I'm going to hire a head coach of the defense, and I'm going to pay him, essentially head coach of the defense, money. I'm going to let him do his own thing, install his own system, recruit his own guys, and you're seeing the fruits of that labor already pay off, which is why we are excited. This new staff is the most exciting staff Mike Gundy's ever put together, in my opinion.
Ooh, I like that. I like that take right there. Most exciting staff. Look, it's definitely a gut check. There's no doubt about it. You talk about uncharacteristic kind of things, and he goes ahead and fires his staff. Things that 15, 16 years of experience on that coaching staff no longer there. So there's going to be some growing pains, I would assume.
Yes.
But there's no way I think those growing pains turn into 0-9 in the Big 12. You brought up Utah, and I think I'm guilty of this as well. I think Utah is going to be towards the top of the Big 12. I don't know the very top, but I think they're going to be more successful than they were last year. I don't think Kyle Whittingham or Mike Gundy is going to allow their teams to be as bad as they were last year. They were both disappointing in the ways that we all predicted. But you're right. There's more of a positive feel for Utah than there is Oklahoma State. I mean, us in general at the Lockdown Podcast Network put out the preseason poll. I'll put it up right for now. Utah is sitting at 8th in our preseason poll, and Oklahoma State is 12th. And I don't think that there should be that much of a discrepancy between the two when you look at the returnings that's happening, what happened last year, and the fact that they're going to be, in the kind of the same boat as last year. We can go into a whole conversation about Kansas State because we got to play both those teams back to back at the 10th and 11th games of the season on the road. So I'm not looking forward to any of this, but it starts in Stillwater, that road trip. And that's what I'm not excited about whatsoever, because last year for Kansas State started 7-1. Then the wheels fell off in a game where you did not expect it to happen, Cody. The game that the wheels fell off was against Houston. So this is why I'm saying you shouldn't sleep on Oklahoma State, a team that finished 0-9 in the Big 12 last year, because you head to the road, on the road in Stillwater for the 10th game of the season. And if you're flying high, well, if history is repeating itself, at least from last season, that sounds like a really strong chance that the wheels could potentially fall off in Stillwater. What do you think about that?
I mean, anything's possible in this league. I think Arizona State just proved that.
That's true.
Fun part for Oklahoma State, right? You mentioned Kansas State. I do think that we have our very own version of Avery Johnson that is about to take some major snaps in Stillwater, Oklahoma. He's a dude that if you lined up Avery Johnson and Hoss Haney in a foot race, I legitimately do not know who would win. I know Hoss Haney's a sub 4.4 guy. He's got a confirmed 10.63 100-meter a couple of years ago, 2-time state champ in Texas in track and field. We don't know what he's going to look like throwing with football, but we do know from a speed perspective, numerically, defenses like to play on advantages. a mobile quarterback, and you guys have witnessed it so much with Avery Johnson, if somebody is that fast that he can outrun the corners, it does change the complexity of what the defense is trying to accomplish. And that is exciting in Stillwater to have a track speed level guy taking the snaps this year.
Ooh, 23 mile an hour is what Avery Johnson made it in the strength and conditioning this year. I don't know if your guy's at the 23 miles an hour, maybe he is, but that would be a heck of a race.
It was 22.75 is what he got clocked at TCU last year. He had he played in that 4 to 5 game stretch that they allowed them to play into. And he was a running package guy. But still, when Josh Hoover's having an all Big 12 caliber season, has one of the top 10 best passing yards in the country, and you still find a way to squeeze Hoss Haney in there as a true freshman, to me, that indicates that Hoss Haney was just too good to keep off the field. Now, they didn't let him throw the ball, but from a running perspective, we witnessed the Spencer Sanders effect that it had. Casey Dunn's offense was so elementary that Spencer Sanders was the dude who would run around like a chicken with his head cut off and make some crazy things happen. That's what we ought to see this year out of Hoss Haney and Avery Johnson. They've both got a little bit of that Johnny Manziel feel to them, and it's going to be exciting to see it produce on the field.
Ooh, I like the Manziel kind of comparison here, because I have gone on record to say that Avery Johnson is a dark horse candidate for that good old Heisman Trophy this season in 2025. Let's get into more conversation about Oklahoma State and Kansas State, how their teams and their rosters look like heading into the new year, and maybe kind of answer where we think they might be record-wise when they meet up towards the end of the season. Let's do that next right here on this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Oklahoma State. But first, Cody, we got to talk about our sponsor today, and that is Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can, whether you're growing your savings plans or planning a big purchase. I just bought a house, so this is perfect timing. Monarch Money helped me out here. It puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you that full visibility and control over your finances. One of the most surprising things I noticed, and that's helping me with making sure I can pay my mortgage now, is not worrying about all these food orders that I took care of, these food delivery apps, you name it, all that stuff. Was spending way too much money on that. And not only is it helping my waistline, Cody, it's helping my pocket. And I can thank Monarch Money for that one as well. So if you want to be like me and look better in jeans and also making sure that you can take care of things, Monarch Money can help you out and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right, monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And welcome on back to this Locked On College crossover, Locked On Oklahoma State, Locked On Kansas State. Christian Rauh, Cody Stovall, bringing you some great Big 12 coverage. And we're talking about this game that's happening towards the later on in the season. It's the 10th game of the season for Kansas State and Oklahoma State, but it's one that you shouldn't be sleeping on because it's in Stillwater. It could be one of the reasons that could hold Kansas State out of Arlington potentially. And it might be one, and dare I say, and I don't know if I should be underestimating you here, but from finishing 0-9 the year before, this could be one that makes sure that Oklahoma State could find themselves back into a bowl game in 2025. I think that's at least a realistic viewpoint. Take me through your thought process. Where is this roster sit for Oklahoma State heading into fall camp that's about to just start for you guys? And where do you think, I don't know, looking at your non-conference, you got a really tough one going against Oregon the second week of the season. How do you like that heading into Big 12 play?
My mic comes on second. My apologies. I feel really, really good about where the roster is heading, right? I do think that we have some positions that we can lean on early in the season. All the quarterbacks, maybe, kind of figuring some things out. But from a speed perspective, we've done really, really well in recruiting, right? We talked about how excited we are about the coaching staff coming in. That is because they're all from the SEC, right? Todd Grantham has over a decade of experience coaching in the SEC between defensive coordinator, defensive line. He was a defensive coordinator for Nick Saban at Bama even. And then he also has almost 11 years coaching in the NFL. He brings that pedigree to Oklahoma State, which is something we've never done before. Mike Gundy hires the gems, right? Mike Gundy goes and gets the coaches that nobody's heard of, so they'll stay in Stillwater for a decade. This is different. He went out and got a heavy hitter. And what did that heavy hitter do? He brought all of his guys with him from his days back at Mississippi State, 2015, 2016, his days at Florida, his days at Bama. He brought his crew, linebackers coaches, cornerback coaches, safety coaches with him. And I think that's going to be massive for Oklahoma State this season. and he got in J.K. Johnson from LSU, Mordecai McDaniel from Florida, Jandavian Bradley, formerly 5-star of Tennessee. He brought in Brian McCoy, who was a 5th-round draft grade coming out of Akron to be that middle linebacker role. I do think that we upgraded substantially athletically, and that alone gives us excitement. We're going to play with SEC speed. Does that mean we're going to be able to, put it together on the field? No, we have no idea. But Todd Grantham has a proven track record in the SEC of producing NFL caliber dudes on a regular basis and putting their teams in positions to be successful. We're excited about that in Stillwater. And plus, we have some returning dudes. Like Rodney Fields got to play some running back last year, looked very promising. We've got some wide receivers that have come over from Auburn, and we've got a wide receiver that came over from Nebraska. This should be a revolutionary style season. And yes, sometimes when you go 60 heavy on the portal, it's a disaster. But Mel Tucker at Michigan State did it with an all-new transfer roster. And if he doesn't have nefarious off-the-field issues, Michigan State could have been building into something special. And then you just recently saw Florida State went 13-1 with 60-ish new players. So it can happen if the cohesiveness is able to build. And I think the staff is good enough to do that. That's why there's excitement, again, in Stillwater.
I like the excitement, but the fact that it's so different, Cody, is it fair for me to question this? And I'm sure you've covered this on your shows in the past as well, especially this offseason. Is it fair to think that if this doesn't work out, because it's so new, that we might be talking about, again, that Mike Gundy should be on the hot seat in 2025?
Oh, no doubt, right? I think Mike Gundy understands that the landscape in college football has changed pretty dramatically. That's why he made this drastic shift to firing everybody and bringing in these heavy hitters that we traditionally don't even try to go get. And I think that's one of the biggest saving graces for Mike Gundy is if he would have, stayed hard-headed and stubborn and refused to fire everybody and refused to adjust to NIL, then his seat is like blazing hot. I do think that him, firing everybody and spending all this NIL money to acquire all of this SEC talent, I think it's going to buy him another year no matter what, unless he goes 0-9 again. I think if Mike Gundy does faceplant, I don't see how, he makes it all that much longer. But I think all of us in Stillwater and even the old school Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Techs of the world would like to see Mike Gundy go out on top, whether it's a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now. Mike Gundy deserves, even if there's been moments that I've hated some of his decisions, right? He deserves to go out on top. He deserves to go out with an 11-12 win season and a Big 12 championship. So I think that the acceptance of this new era is the biggest reason why he's bound to have a successful season. I think bowl game's the basement, man. Bowl game's the basement. Winning 7 games in Stillwater is the absolute bare minimum. And I fully anticipate that we get there primarily because of the talent acquisition in the coaching staff and on the field. And the schedule sets us up, man. 7 home games. We don't play BYU. We don't play TCU. We don't play Arizona State. We don't play WV. I think we do avoid a lot of the troublesome matchups. We play Baylor at home. We play Kansas State at home. We play Iowa State at home. This is the season for Oklahoma State fans to get excited. And it's a season for non-Oklahoma State fans to cash in, man. If your over-under is 4.5, 5.5, and people are projecting Oklahoma State to be 12th, 13th, 14th in the Big 12, throw down some money, man. I think it was a $5 bet for Oklahoma State winning the Big 12 title. It was like a $2,500 winning or something to that effect. It's crazy. It's crazy, right? Or maybe it was $1,500, but regardless, it was nuts. The money lines right now for Oklahoma State are so much fun that it may never happen again, right? If Oklahoma State rebounds and we have another 10-win season, will Oklahoma State ever be projected at 4.5 wins again? Probably not. Probably not. I think the 3-win season was a good thing. It allowed Mike Gundy to see that the landscape has changed. He must embrace it. We must spend SEC-level money to go get SEC-level talent. You have to do it. And we did it. So if the Cowboy culture can kind of ring everybody in, this should be a big year. It should be a good opportunity for Oklahoma State because of the schedule, because of the heavy hitter matchups that we do avoid, and all of the home games. The talent is going to speak for itself. It's just a matter of, can we understand the complexities and put it on the field? That'll remain to be seen.
I love the wake up call type of aspect that you have right now of what has to happen in
Yeah.
Stillwater. You said the basement is 6-7 wins. You cover this team every day. Is it the same feeling for the fans of Stillwater, for the fans of Oklahoma State after having a down year last year? The expectation hasn't changed. They got to get back to that winning ways.
Yeah, I think everybody's understanding that if Mike Gundy doesn't get back to that 6-7 win threshold, then he's certainly in some trouble because of the adaptation, right? There's been several coaches, including Nick Saban, including Dabo Swinney until recently, that were not necessarily refusing to adapt, but even Mike Gundy mentioned it. He assumed, like many other coaches, that the NIL stuff would kind of fizzle out in a few years and it wouldn't be as big a deal as it is. But he was wrong. So he had to make this change. And if it doesn't happen, it could be catastrophic. And that's not good for Mike Gundy. But I think he understands that, which is why we made the moves that we have.
Yeah, adapt or die. That's definitely what college football has definitely been about over these last couple of years. And it looks like that stuff's not changing anytime soon, especially with settlements and executive orders coming out when it comes to this new NIL. Speak of cowboy culture and of how the talent will speak for itself. Well, I have a few matchups that I want to bring up to your attention and how I think, Kansas State is going to be in the better spot, especially on the offensive side. How can your position groups on the Oklahoma State side shut them down? Let's talk about that. And of course, a little bit Big 12 talk. Maybe I'll get some bold predictions from you as well. Let's do that to finish up this Locked On College crossover. Locked On Kansas State, Locked On Oklahoma State, bringing you a Locked On College crossover, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you haven't already, wherever you're listening, hit that subscribe button, rate audio, whatever you're doing, because we are bringing you the best content on the Big 12. And we're talking about a game that's happening later on in the year, but it's a very important one that could be for both teams. Maybe now I'm getting a little bit more excited for Oklahoma State. I thought maybe bowl was the highlight, the ceiling for this team, but you're making me think otherwise. And look, with Kansas State, and I live for the record thinking you shouldn't sleep on that, and I'm the one that's sleeping on them right on this episode, Cody. Kansas State has brought in some offensive talent this year, and I think it's a lot more improved than it was last year. Although they lose players like DJ Giddens, I think the running back room is loaded. Avery Johnson in year 2 as the starting quarterback. He's put on some good weight and some speed. I think it's going to help with his, make sure that he's healthy. He's going to be a little bit more dual threat. The tight end room is still absolutely loaded. They didn't lose anybody after having 13 red zone touchdowns that led the country. And they also brought in top recruit in Lincoln Cure. Wide receivers, they bring in size. That's what I want to lead right here. The wide receiver room brings back Jace Brown, their top wide receiver, but they bring in size for the first time in quite some time. 6'4", 6'3" type of guys from Jared Tibbs and Jared Bradley. I think that's going to be impressive and helpful for Avery Johnson. How can Oklahoma State stop that? What's your secondary look like this year? And maybe your linebacker room as well that can maybe slow down some of these big wide receivers.
Well, it's funny because I did just talk about this in yesterday's episode that we did something similar, right? We went out and got a bunch of Cam Abshire 6'4", Io showed Mike Keaton 6'4", Christian Fitzpatrick 6'4". So we did something comparable, but the defensive backfield was the position that I think we need to see the most improvement on throughout the course of the season. And I think we're going to be able to do that. We bring in Jalen Davies, who had several years starting at UCLA. He actually just had a very big year last year at UCLA, so they were kind of surprised that he left. We bring in J.K. Johnson, who started 5 games for Ohio State as a freshman before he transferred to LSU, ran into a couple of injuries. Then we have returning Cam Smith, right? All of these guys are 6 foot, 200, 6'1", 205. So we have big cornerbacks. We have big hitting safeties. We got Zaquan Patterson, who started 12 games last year as a freshman at Miami. He's doing massive things. Eric Flitzer could be an X factor. Eric Flitzer comes from Dunbar High School out of, obviously, Texas. He had almost 1,200 yards receiving, and then he made the transition to cornerback this previous season at East Carolina, and now he's transitioning into this new role at Oklahoma State. That has us very excited. I think we're going to be very, very good in the back end of the defense. We're going to be able to manipulate between the outside linebackers, the defensive end. Everybody kind of is running towards that Von Miller, Rover, extra kind of dude. Mm-hmm. But our extra Rover dudes are 6'5", 265, 6'4", 270. And they're able to cover the flats, right? And that's the biggest thing whenever you get those mismatches. You mentioned tight ends. This is probably the first time in a long time we're going to use tight ends. We went out and got 7 tight ends out of the portal. That tells me that we're going to lean in that direction And I think that the defensive backfield has the most speed of any group. And I believe in Jules Montanar. That's the X factor here, Christian. Our cornerback coach is probably the most exciting of all of them to me. Todd Grantham brought in a lot of dudes, but what Jules Montanar has done, I think I did some research on this a couple months ago. In his time as a cornerback defensive back coach, he sent like 21 dudes to the NFL. I'm impressed by what he's done. I'm impressed by his stops. And again, look at recruiting. We're getting in the doors. We got Danny Beal, number one recruit in the country, to get Oklahoma State over LSU. That's huge. You get the number one recruit in the state of Oklahoma, Taj Overton, who chose Oklahoma State over Oregon and OU. These are things that have never really happened before in Stillwater, and I think it's going to be visible on the field as well. There's a different excitement level because of the coaching staff, the intensity. Christian, we ran this thing like an NFL operation. Yeah, we had rookie minicamp, we had OTAs, we had multiple rounds of cuts, and I think that driving everybody to those levels where you're going to have to make the roster, right? Who thinks they go to college, they get a scholarship, they get NIL, and then they get cut? That happened to a ton of 40 some odd dudes that were just on scholarship, found themselves in a position where they were getting cut. So several dudes that were contributors last year are no longer with the team. So that tells me the guys that made the team are operating at a different intensity level, and I cannot wait to see it on the field, brother man.
Cutthroat behavior coming from Oklahoma State, and that's something they have to have.
Yes.
They absolutely have to have after finishing where they did last year to make sure they get back here, and you can tell that it's a make or break kind of year for Coach Gundy. Looking at this schedule, before I get you out of here, you start the season against UT Martin, but then you're on the road against Oregon, and then you finish non-conference against Tulsa. Then you mentioned it. You're at home against Baylor, which we don't get so lucky as well. I'm nervous to go into Waco for that one. You're on the road against Arizona. You're home against Houston and Cincinnati. Probably your toughest road battle is in Lubbock against Texas Tech. We'll see what happens there. Then you're on the road against Lawrence. Then you come to Manhattan. You're in Stillwater for Manhattan. Of course, we've been talking about that the entire show. On the road against UCF, and then you finish the season back at home against Iowa State. You think the absolute floor is 6 or 7 wins. Tell me why this team can't get back to Arlington in 2025.
Well, if the complexity of the defense is understood midway through the season, I think we very well could have an opportunity of making that style of run. My only concern is we went from an offense that had like 44 plays to an offense that has a couple hundred plays. That is going to be difficult. And the defense is even more complex from what I've gathered. So there's going to be 4 to 6 iterations of every single call. So the shifts and the audibles that the quarterback's doing is going to have countermeasures now on the defensive side of the ball. It's going to take some time to figure that out. But if they do figure it out fairly quickly, I think we definitely could make a run. I love what Hoss Haney brings to the table. A healthy version of Zane Flores is a bad mamma jamma. And we've got more than enough weapons. The coaching is going to be significantly different. There's not going to be any complacency. These coaches don't give 13 hoots if you're from Oklahoma State or not. They're here to do a job. They're here to prove a point. And if they do that, I think we could have a very, very big season. This is still Oklahoma State. This is still Mike Gundy. The expectations are still to compete for Big 12 titles, and that's not going to change anytime soon. It's a big gamble when you bring in 60 new dudes, right? Of course. But we've seen it pay off at other places. And I do think that the Cowboy culture is one of those things that can cause cohesiveness rather quickly and put us on a map. It's all going to hinge off of Oregon, right? Let's call a spade a spade. Everybody right now expects Oregon to win by 20, 21, 24-ish points, right? If Oklahoma State wins that game or hangs tough, here's a hot take. I don't think Oregon's quarterback, Dante Moore, is better than Garrett Rangel, the quarterback that just left Oklahoma State to go to Virginia Tech. I don't think Dante Moore is better than Garrett Rangel. Therefore, I think Oklahoma State's going to have an opportunity, not to mention the fact it's a new offense, it's a new defense, and there's no way to game plan. You can't game plan against 65 new dudes in multiple new systems, because what are we going to do against UT Martin? Probably hand the ball off 45 times and throw it occasionally, right? So I'm excited about what Oregon provides, and I do think that we'll make it more competitive than people think. And if Dante Moore gets into trouble and it's late in the fourth quarter, that's when crazy stuff happens. And I think Mike Gundy's going to be way more aggressive this year than ever before. He's been fairly conservative, But I think fourth downs and punting and field goals, I think all of that's going to play a much bigger factor this year than Mike Gundy's typically showing.
I think the Cowboys might be must-watch TV this year in college football. You're definitely making me think so. And
well, I do have to admit before we leave, I've repeated on record, I have K-State and Texas Tech in the Big 12 title. So until we play Oregon, I'm going to stick with K-State, Texas Tech. But I think we're going to be close. We're going to surprise some people.
I'm with you. I don't think you should be sleeping on this team. And what other conference than the Big 12 can you say the team that finished last the year before with not a single win in the conference could potentially make it back to the Big 12 championship game the year later? And then when you have that conversation, you're like, you know, it actually could happen. You ain't talking about that with the Big 10. You're not talking about that the SEC or the ACC, only in the most deepest conference in college football, the Big 12, Cody.
How many games did Arizona State win 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Was it 3 or 4?
Yeah,
right?
That's it.
Right? So Arizona State literally Arizona State's the reason that we're not doing the Big 12 official preseason polls anymore, because it's dumb. It makes no sense. And with so many transfer portal players, if it clicks, you have no clue what the team's going to look like. Right. So I agree with that positioning. Arizona State just proved you can go from 3 wins to 10, 11 wins pretty quickly if the transfer portal class comes together pretty quickly.
Lots to talk about. And of course, we'll make sure you have you covered here, either on Locked On Kansas State or Locked On Oklahoma State for the rest of the year, heading into the new season. Week 0, where Kansas State takes on Iowa State, is less than 30 days away to open up the college football season. And what better way to do it with 2 Big 12 opponents? Cody, thanks for joining me on this episode of this Locked On College crossover between Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Oklahoma State. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time.